ready? It's the Roundtable with me, Robert Bannon. Welcome to the Roundtable, everybody. My name is Robert Bannon. You're listening to us on the Broadway Podcast Network or watching us on Broadway World or over here on social media like YouTube. I'm excited to have our next guest. Our next guest, Rich Hull, everybody, has done like the movies we all grew up watching. I mean, I love Freddie Prinze Jr. and I love She's All That so much. It's the cutest movie ever. I saw Freddie Prinze Jr. in New York once and I fanned out because of that movie, because I grew up with that movie. And he's worked with people like Halle Berry, and he's created companies, and he's sold companies, and he's been on the list of the top 100 entrepreneurs. So Rich knows what he's talking about, everybody. And Rich has put together a movie with Chris Pratt that you need to see. We owe a great debt of gratitude to the veterans of this country. They often don't get the respect that they deserve. They come home to a lot of politics and noise that defeats the purpose of what they do. They go out and defend our freedom and have since the birth of this country. And so this Veterans Day, I have the perfect film, the perfect place for you to go to honor the veterans. And Rich is here to tell us all about it. Rich Hull, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Robert. And consider yourself hired as my publicist. What a great intro.
Oh, thank you. I'm available and I'm cheap. Rich, I was going to say to you, I need Rich to teach me how to make a lot of money and sell my companies to bigger companies and then go sit on a beach. But you don't go sit on a beach, Rich.
No, I get bored so easily. Plus, my wife would throw me out if I were just sitting around the house. So, got to stay busy.
Well, Rich, I was reading a little bit about you. Your family comes from a lot of business. Your father was a lawyer in Texas and all of this stuff. Has business and not film or entertainment in particular, but just business in general. Has that always been a mind frame of yours? You've always been a businessman?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before. So that's really interesting. I would say that for me, my experience in the film industry has been half business and half creative. And I think kind of my secret sauce has always been the ability to speak both languages, the business language and the creative language, and then be able to translate between those two. And I feel like to a certain extent, that's kind of a job of a producer, but also that's kind of been my lane within the business. And so sometimes I put on my purely creative hat, sometimes purely business, and sometimes I'm somewhere in between. So I guess I've got some of it. But I think I've also got this ability to speak creative as well.
Well, and I think what makes you such a good producer. And that's why you work with people like Halle Berry and Matthew McConaughey and all sorts of people to get the word out. What's fascinating about your career, when you look at the filmography and television that you've worked on, there seems to be at a point, Rich, where you took the idea of making films like She's All That, which we talked about, or a fun cinematic release. And then you ventured into almost like real life documentary mission pieces. Was that on purpose?
Yes, it was on purpose, actually. And when I came to Los Angeles, I wanted to make the movies that I grew up on, like what you were talking about, right? So for me, the movies I grew up on were the John Hughes movies, Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller, those were like the soundtrack of my teenage years. And so, we did in Hollywood what we always do, which is we kill a genre by overmaking it. And then that genre had largely been dormant for, 20 years. And then I show up here, maybe 10 years. And, I came here and that's why I came here, is to make those kinds of movies. And so I think She's All That reignited that genre. And then there were a whole bunch that came after that, some of which I made, some of which other people made. But the thing about it is, what I realized is those movies pay the bills, and there's a lot of versions you can make. Because everybody kind of has the same high school experience. Everybody has a different college experience, and some people don't go to college. But high school, everything is the same for everybody. Nobody feels like they belong, and everybody's kind of a fish out of water. And it's always the same experience. So they're very universal. They pay the bills, but I didn't feel like that they would be changing the world. And I felt like, well, if I'm going to have this platform here and a voice in kind of the industry and be a storyteller, I want to do things that change the world. And about that time, this project years ago came across my desk with Halle Berry about Black soldiers that had fought in all the US wars we ever had. And she and I made it. There was a filmmaker named Frank Martin. There was a whole group of people that made it. And we won the NAACP Image Award and a bunch of other awards. And I realized that that was a movie that I felt like changed the world. and hopefully made the world just a slightly better place, and told a bunch of stories that probably had never been told and needed to be told. And it really kind of unlocked this thing in me that allows me to do what a lot of people do in our business, which is like you make a few movies to pay the bills, and then you make a few movies because they're passion projects and you really want to be the storyteller for it. And that's ultimately what this one is. This one is really a labor of love and a very passion-filled project for me and for everybody else involved. Not to mention my partner, Chris Pratt, who you mentioned earlier, has just been so gracious to become involved and so supportive. And it really checks a lot of boxes for him. It's a very authentic movie for him because he really is very into the military experience, and he's got sort of a faith-based element to him. There's just a lot of things about him. And he's a good dude, and so like, there's just a lot of boxes that it checks for him. And so to see him be so supportive is great. But I think we're all doing it for that reason, that we feel like it probably makes the world a slightly better place.
Man, Rich, when you were talking, I just wanted to be like, I'll give you $100 to go through your cell phone contact list.
Yes. That can be arranged, by the way.
All right, let's Venmo you over. So yeah, we're talking the film that we're talking about, Fighting Spirit, Combat Chaplain's Journey, is going to be released wide. It's going to be released on Veterans Day, which is in November. Everyone, November 8th. So when you have a film like this, tell it. Is this a documentary? Is this a feature? What is this? What is this film?
It is. So it's a documentary. It comes out November 8th, as you mentioned. It's the first day of Veterans Day weekend. And we picked that weekend for obvious reasons, right? Veterans Day, it's a pretty good tie-in. But there was another reason too, which is that it's 3 days after the US presidential election. And so we could kind of see that the country is going through a little chaos and kind of it's feeling divisive. And this movie is purpose-built to bring people together. And we picked that date. One of the reasons we picked that date is because we felt like this is the movie that the country needs at that moment, right? I think everybody's going to want to take a breath and kind of like figure out, are there things we can actually agree on? And who in their right mind can't agree on the role of combat chaplains and the value that these heroic people bring, and people from different geographies and political bents and cultures, like we can all agree on that, man. And if you think about this profession, which is one that most people don't know about, and I didn't know about when I started the project, these are people that go to battle wearing a uniform but carry no weapon, which means you've got to be motivated by something like really much bigger than life, And so when you go out there, you may come from a particular faith or, and every faith, and, it's a very diverse group within the military, the chaplain corps. But when you're out there on the front lines, like, to some extent, like, all that goes out the window. You're dealing with people of all faiths and no faiths and very life and death issues. And, the one of the leading causes of death in the military is not getting shot at war, it's suicide. And these are the guys that are out there on the front lines, like turning that around. And so it's just this incredible, heroic, noble profession. And so most people just don't know about it. And so when they see this movie and they see some of these stories and they see the journey that our hero is on and some of the stories that inspired him along the way, and we take a peek at the 419 different combat chaplains who've lost their life throughout every war that we've had, in American history, you recognize the value that these guys bring and these women bring, and who can't agree on that, And so that's why we all decided to do it. That's why we picked this date. And, it's coming up soon. And we're a little independent movie getting a big theatrical release. And so we don't have, hundreds of millions of dollars like superhero movies do. So we're relying on people like you and your friends and passing the word, because word of mouth is how these things get out there. And these are how people learn about it and inspire people to show up, whether they're, they've got some connection to the military, or maybe there's a faith-based connection, or maybe there's none of those at all. And they're just a general population audience and they want to be inspired by something. So that's why we're doing it.
Well, I know that researching a little, firstly, you said it perfectly. It's going to be right after the election. I don't know when, and this show is not political, and I know your movie's not political in that way either, but I don't know when we started arguing politically over who's patriotic and who because I think we all should, as Americans, we all can love America. We could all claim veterans are heroes. We don't have to fight each other about it. I think we should, some things we can agree on, like veterans built this country. And your story follows, I'm a little Italian Irish kid from Jersey. My grandmother, Vincenza Di Meglio, is the most Catholic human being in the world. So I know, like, someone like her, she may never have heard, and the person you talk about in this film, maybe the next saint is somebody who has been spoken about. Can you tell us a little bit about who the film's about and the journey and why you picked this particular chaplain?
Yeah, and look, I have a Catholic mother as well who is, very good at playing the guilt card, and I like all good Catholic mothers, and in fact, we screened this movie at the Pope's house. It turns out that the Pope has a screening room at his house. So like Vatican City has their own like theater system and stuff, but like the Pope actually has his own screening room, and like it was built in 900 AD. Turns out there weren't that many movies back then, and so it was an old chapel, and it's got like stone walls and arches and high ceilings. Like if it were a screening room in LA, like nobody would go to it, but it was in the Pope's house, and you go through the Swiss Guard to get into his house, and that's a whole thing. And there's probably like 25 seats in this like little like screening room, and the people that had been invited to screen there were like, the icons of filmmaking icons of our time. It's Scorsese and people like that. And we were invited to screen. And so that made my Catholic mother very proud. And so when we were making the movie, there were a lot of interesting things that happened, I think, because documentaries, you make a plan. The only thing you know for sure is that the plan's going to be wrong. And then these things kind of take on a life of their own, and they take a left turn and a right turn. And then you always run out of money. And there's like always a thing. There's a playbook with documentaries, right? And so when we were in production, I think the film was still trying to figure out what it wanted to be. And there was a Catholic Army chaplain that had died in a POW camp 70 years earlier in the Korean War, named Father Emil Capon. And during production, the military identified his remains. And so they brought those back to the US and repatriated them, and decided that they would have kind of a funeral in Wichita, Kansas, which is his hometown. And so between the Catholic Church and the military, they both know how to put on a good show. And so they collaborated on this incredible, like expansive, like kind of multi-day funeral for him that kind of closed down the entire town of Wichita and really brought people out. And so we thought, I don't know how we're going to use it, but let's just go film that. And when we did that, we took one of the guys that was involved in the film named Justin Roberts, and we sent him to the funeral. And Justin is a former Army chaplain, and he co-directed the project with me. And I wasn't a veteran. My dad was a veteran, but I wasn't a veteran, and Justin was. And so he brought like a really authentic perspective to what we were working on. But we put him on the road, and we sent him there. And that journey, when he got there, became like his own cathartic journey. Not to mention a different journey that he kind of collided with, which was Father Capon's journey, his remains to come home and be buried by the military, by the Catholic Church. And it really became kind of the through line for the movie. And we then used Justin as the tour guide on his way to the funeral to kind of tell some of these stories of the chaplains that had come before him, that had worked in combat, that had died in combat, that had sort of inspired Justin to become an Army chaplain in the first place. And it was kind of inspired by this movie. Do you remember the movie My Octopus Teacher?
Yes.
So like that movie won an Oscar a few years ago. Yes. And I loved it. It was one of those just movies that I loved. It was so cool. And when they shot that movie, it was really about the life cycle of an octopus, right? From birth to death. And they shot it, and it was like a nature film. And so like they kind of wasn't working. And so then they recut it. It was still a nature film. And they sent it to like a friend of a friend of a friend who was a director in LA. And he goes, well, tell me more about the guy that shot it. And the guy that shot it was going through his own life issues. And so he realized, like, let's go interview that guy and let's kind of weave those stories together. And that's where the movie took shape. That's where the magic happened. And so we kind of took a very similar approach here, which is like, we put Justin on the road to go to Father Capon's funeral. And through that, Justin became like our tour guide through the stories. And when he got there, he kind of had this like overwhelming result. Like, it, you know, he thought he would be like the only guy there. And it turns out that like he wasn't by any stretch. And that was really powerful for him. And he was going through a lot of real post-military struggles in his life and trying to make sense of his time in the military. And this really became a life-changing journey for him. So the word journey is like a very pervasive thing in the movie, and it's intentionally vague in the title. Like, whose journey is this? Is this Justin's journey or Father Capon's journey or some of the journeys of the other chaplains whose stories we tell? But that's ultimately how it happened, that this Catholic priest, former chaplain, became kind of the centerpiece of the movie that you're talking about.
Wow. Oh, so if that doesn't hook you and fascinate you to see what the journey is, my dad still sends me videos of octopuses after that movie, by the way. Yes. I got one yesterday. He's become obsessed. I want you to all to know that the film will be out and you can see it. There's 20 major markets. I'm talking about LA to New York, across this country, so that you can see it. So when you see a film like this, and it's a film that is it perfect for veterans? Is it perfect for families? Is it perfect for who would you like to see this movie?
It is. It's rated PG-13, so it's probably not for little kids. But which I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they're dying to know what it is because they've heard so much about it. But it's probably not for them. It's for everybody else. And so I think people with a military connection, it's definitely for them. And they seem to have this very powerful reaction. I was just we had a screening at Vanderbilt University last weekend, which is also where I went to college, and the military sent a bunch of guys there, and we did a really interesting Q&A afterwards. And it was a real packed house, and it was great. And there were all these big like military guys, like ex-military guys, like ex-Marines, that were coming up to me afterwards, and they were like the dudes you don't want to meet in a bar fight because they're like big, and like they all had tears streaming down their face, and they were giving hugs. And I think at the beginning of it for them, it was kind of it stirred a recollection of their time in the military or their connection to the military if they were families. And by the end, I think it became this thing where it was real tears of joy, because it was like, you're giving voice to my story in a way that I'm not sure I've got the language to do or the platform to do. And so I think that's part of who the movie's for. I think, there's a certain kind of faith-based element to it that the faith-based audiences really turn out for it, and they really love it, and it speaks to them in a special way. And then the general market, people just want to understand what this odd profession that they don't know anything about. It's really more than a profession. It's like, it's a true life calling, And so I think when they get in there, they're incredibly surprised by it. It's a journey into a world they just didn't know. So for all those 3 big groups, that's who the movie's for. It's really built with a very, the aperture is open very wide for the people that that we see enjoying the movie. Because I'm not sort of on this circuit right now of like, pre-release screenings, and so I kind of see how the movie plays. And I've been in those screenings where like you're like, this movie is not working. Like I've got a dud on my hands. And I know what that feeling feels like, and this is not it. And who knows? We don't have a crystal ball. Who knows? If anybody will show up on November 8th. But for the ones that do, I think they're gonna really have a powerful experience.
They will. And these screenings, everyone, have been from the Vatican to Fort Knox. Like the Fort Knox, like you kept this place as safe as Fort Knox.
Like you go to the screening, there's like gold all around you.
Oh, that's what I picture. That I think the Vatican and Fort Knox are both made of only gold. same type of screening room. I think it's so honorable and so beautiful that you made this film. And my uncle, and he doesn't like to talk about it, but my Uncle Bob is a veteran from Vietnam. He enlisted before getting drafted and became a postman. You don't think like there's a man who's delivering letters in Vietnam from people's home and his journey, like the same thing. Like you don't think about the person who chooses to be a chaplain and enlist in the military and go overseas and be in places of combat and try to serve the soldiers. we don't think of these American hero stories. We have such an image of what it means to be in the military. And I think, Rich, what you're doing with this film, and you're giving life and knowledge and visibility to people who never get to tell their story.
It's so true, because the chaplains, they don't want to be the story, which means they kind of suck at telling their story. And so, nor would they want to. That's just not how they're wired. And so they're there to support people, to serve people that are serving us as Americans, not to be the story. And so we've almost kind of pulled some of these stories out of them, like kicking and screaming. But these stories consequently have never been told before. Like, we're telling these stories in some cases for the first time. And so I think it's an honor for me to shine a spotlight on what they do. And so, yeah, they're just incredibly heroic people, man.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I'm looking forward to all of you going to the movies and seeing it. Go see it in a movie theater, get popcorn and a soda, and go have a moment. Take your veteran friends, family, and go see it. Teach a little piece of American history. Rich, how can we follow the movie or follow you, find out more information about what you're doing and what you're up to?
So the best place is to go to the movie's website. So it's fightingspiritfilm.com, fightingspiritfilm.com.
We'll put it below.
Perfect. And then I would say follow Chris Pratt. You can become, he's got 50 million Instagram followers. You can become 50 million and one. Because he's been really great about putting out videos and talking about the film and giving insights and kind of special stories that people don't really know for the film. So that's a great place. You can look me up on Instagram or LinkedIn or any of those, normal places as well.
I'll be following, and we'll be sharing, and I'll be 50 million and one Chris Pratt's follower. Yes. Rich, I don't know, a Marvel, from a DC, from Swan Lake to Disney princess. But I know Chris Pratt puts out great work and is a great guy, and he's a real patriot about this country. And to put his name and his followers and his real estate on this film means something. You won't do that for anything. So you have something special here for sure.
I'm biased when I say this, but I agree, and we're super grateful for Chris, and he's been a great partner and a great collaborator, and I'm just really happy to have him involved.
Well, Rich, it's been a pleasure. I may have to go. I hope you still get a little residual if I watch She's All That, because now you have me feeling nostalgia.
I hope you pay full price wherever you buy it.
Wherever I get it, I'm going to find it full price. So the next time that check comes in the mail, a couple pennies of it come from me. And I appreciate you. Thank you for your lifetime of work and putting out stories and all of that you've done and continue to do. And we'll be following, and we'll be looking forward to what's next. Everybody, make sure you go to the movies, Fighting Spirit, A Combat Chaplain's Journey, this November 8th. Across the country, go to the website, the link's below, and you can find it in your neck of the woods. And make sure you celebrate it and thank a veteran this Veterans Day for sure. Rich, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.